Hello and welcome to Dialogue. For the past 2 years, countries have been hit hard by the COVID pandemic, and now the Russia-Ukraine crisis threatens to cause even more damage to the international world order and the global economy. How will the world adapt? How much should we be worried about rising global inflation? And can China's Belt and Road Initiative provide new ideas for global economic recovery? To consider these questions, I'm joined by Liu Zhenmin, Under Secretary General for the Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thank you, Mr. Liu, for your time to join our discussion. And after expanding by 5.5% in 2021, global economic output is projected to grow by only 4% in 2022 and even lower, 3.5% in 2023 as next year, according to the report prepared by your department, UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Because of the Ukraine war now ongoing, do you think we can still reach this prediction of 4% for the year 2022?
I think the last year really is a rebound of the global economy. That also happens in all countries, including the US, including China, the largest economies. But of course, this year, I think, of course, since the global gradual recovery, the growth will get to normal, but still be slow. I think that in the beginning of the year, when we published our World Economic Situation and Prospects report, the UN system, we projected that the global growth by this year would be 4% in average. But of course, this is the projection done in January. But of course, you mentioned that the Ukrainian crisis. I think that this crisis really added uncertainty to the global economic growth. I think that we're still watching the impacts of overall crisis of Ukraine. But I think it be preliminarily our assessment would be we are not going to reach that 4%. Maybe I think it will be a downside will be around 1% globally.
Around 1% is lower, yes.
Yeah, I think it means that globally at the best it will reach the growth rate about around 3%, more or less. It will depending on the severity and the duration of the Ukrainian crisis.
Speak of the United States, the biggest economy. How big the inflation is an issue for this country's economic growth?
Of course, the U.S. I think in the United States they are as the largest economy. They are also as the holding of the global the currency for exchange, the U.S. dollar. So their inflation, they'll be affecting not only the domestic market, also affecting the global market. Domestically, I think, of course, the U.S. is facing the inflation, the highest inflation rate since the last 40 years. But I think in reality, in daily life, I think people are still feeling. So that's, I think, especially for the poor people, even for the middle class, they started to complain that because how they are going to accommodate this continued inflation and rising of the prices. So that's, I think, this also affecting their consumption mentality. Of course, they are trying to save the money and to trying to take care of their daily necessities. Of course, this also affect the overall economic growth. Mm-hmm. So I think domestically this happens. But we noticed the U.S. Federal Reserve is taking the issue seriously. I think they are also taking, of course, but nobody knows what impact this policy interest rates will affect the inflation. But I think internationally or globally speaking, of course, U.S. inflation also affecting. We think for example, any adjustment of the policy interest rate will affect developing countries, because I think that the increase of the policy interest rate will really added additional burden for developing countries for the service of the debt. Because I think most of the debt in developing countries, they have to be served in US dollars. So the inflation is not a national problem, it's becoming a global problem. So I think we all expect that the US government, especially the Federal Reserve, will take additional measures to really curtail its inflation.
Globally, if you take a look at the impact of the Ukraine war, for example, the World Trade Organization issued a report saying, warning that there could be a food crisis. We know Russia, Ukraine, they are a very important source of wheat export and other grain products over there. So for developing countries, do you see there's a food crisis probably upcoming in many countries?
Actually, I think this is a worry of the United Nations. Secretary General Antonio Guterres already set up a global crisis response group. I think my department and myself also part of that group. We're following the issue daily. I think what worried about for those countries, they have a direct inputs of food, wheat, from Ukraine, from Russia, they are going to be affected immediately. We found that some of the Africans, some of the Middle East countries, they are directly infected. For example, like Sudan, I think the country has had a domestic trouble, economic, political, all crisis, but their import of wheat, 80% import of wheat are from Ukraine, Russia. When the trade between from Ukraine and Russia they be disrupted, I think they are confronting a serious crisis, a problem. That has been the case for a number of Middle East countries and African countries. We hope that the international community could be united. I think it could collaborate, find alternative ways to provide the food to those countries and those people who are really suffering.
Yes, the Ukraine crisis will end at some point in the future, but then people are looking at the long-term impact, for example, on globalization, on the global trade, and also say even the international order, as we are seeing that the European countries and the United States, they are basically not only imposing sanctions, but basically decoupling from Russia. Russia will more or less be isolated or more isolated because of the war. And so how will that affect globalization? Are we going to see the globalization being disrupted? Or probably we are seeing the rise of fragmented globalization or regionalization?
Actually, I think in the real world, globalization already a daily life for every country and for every person. So even Russia and Ukraine, they have been already integrated into this globalization since the dissolution of former Soviet Union and since their independence. Some people are talking about whether we are come to the end of the post-Cold War world order, or trade, especially trade order, economic order. I think that the production, supply, trade would be more or less be adjusted. So there'll be more regional trade will going to be increased. I think you can see that even last year, or even during the last 2 years, China ASEAN trade increased dramatically.
That's right.
It means it be trade within the region becoming more convenient, more cheaper, so that's I think to be this kind of phenomenon will the world need to take care. So, but this cannot reverse the global trade, reverse global supply chain, and reverse global economic globalization. So we should, people and all countries should continue to be confident that globalization already become daily life.
And one factor also probably contributing to the globalization, many people would point to the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. There's a survey done last year of the BRI countries, the central banks of those BRI countries. 75% of them believe BRI projects will be contributing to the economic recovery from this global pandemic. What do you make of that?
I think actually that BRI has really contributed to the bilateral and the regional cooperation between China with other countries, as well as among other countries. At the same time, I think BRI also has really contributed to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. That's why in 2017, when Secretary General Antonio Guterres was in Beijing for the first time for the official visit and for the first time for his attending the first high-level forum on the BRI in Beijing, convened by by President Xi in Beijing. He really sent very clear message that the BRI could serve as an important platform for facilitating achievement of 2030 Agenda. I think over the past years, even during the pandemic, we are glad to see the cooperation along the BRI countries. It has really been improved and increased. So really, BRI has proved to be an important platform for contributing to the economic growth, for contributing to the improvement of trade. So I hope that BRI will continue to be revitalized among the countries, even for the global recovery. I think there's still great potential for the improvement of BRI. So people are talking about how other countries going to best use the BRI. I think people are talking maybe some areas of investment could continue to be encouraged, like for infrastructure construction. Of course, even that would be help many of countries improve their local infrastructure. So I think that the BRI, the investment, also consistent what on the policy with the policy what the UN is advocating. That for the United Nations, we are now advocating the investment in SDGs. Investment in SDGs, of course, first and foremost, we are encouraging the investment in the global south, in developing countries, to improve their infrastructure. So that's why I think we encourage that those not only governments, but also the business community really think of maybe how they can use this platform of BRI to continue their cooperation. Only when the world, every country is safe, the world will be safe from the pandemic. Countries like US, China, they could continue to collaborate to lead the global transition.
A year ago, Mr. Liu, you said to achieve a better global economic recovery in the post-pandemic era and to create a better future for all mankind, 3 priorities should be met. Rapid and equitable distribution of vaccines, financial support for individuals and countries in need, and joint efforts to address global climate and environmental issues. 1 year later, do you still consider these as the most important priorities?
Thank you for referring my comments a year ago on the 3 priorities of the world. Actually, I think for the United Nations, we continue to believe that these three priorities remain effective. First, on vaccination, the world is still struggling for the containment on the pandemic. So vaccination become even important than before. So for the WHO and for United Nations, we have a strategy to vaccinate the global population for 70% in each country by the mid of 2022. But until now, I think it'll be some good progress in some countries, but I think in some countries it seems to be difficult to achieve this target. We were told to be, Africa, there's until now just only some 15% of population has get vaccinated. It means that in the coming months, it's difficult to achieve this 70% goal. So sadly, we were told to be for some African countries, they will achieve the 70% goal of vaccination. Even they have to wait until 2024. This is unfortunate. So for Secretary General Antonio Guterres, I think for the United Nations, we're still promoting and pushing the world to really to help each other, help the African countries, help LDC countries really to speed up their process of vaccination. I think only when the world, every country is safe, the world will be safe from the pandemic. So this reality, in view that the new surge of the infections of pandemic happening recently in a number of countries in Asia, in Europe, I think it'll be so that global vaccination is becoming even more urgent than before. So we are encouraging that to continue to speed up the vaccination process. On the financing theory, I think it'll be when we're talking about the recovery, global recovery, we see that we have seen that for the developed countries, they use all their economic tools, financial tools for stimulus plans. So almost every developed country, they have a package policy for stimulus plan for investment. But unfortunately, for a great number of developing countries, they don't have. So financing for development remains a challenge. I think, of course, now we are still advocating that the developed countries should really help, and the business community also should help developing countries for their global recovery by investing and by providing financial support, especially in view that over the past weeks that a number of countries in developing world they're confronting a kind of debt distress. Of course, a few countries already in debt default. So this means that their urgent financial support are needed for those countries to ensure that no further country going to be bankrupt, due to the debt. So this financing has become more urgent than before. Climate action, really, I think, in view of all this crisis, people seem to be going to forget that what we're doing for climate action. But I think the recent IPCC report, that report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, reveals that this remains a very urgent threat of climate change, that we need to really to do more. That's why I think the Secretary General Antonio Guterres of the UN continue to push that all countries should really bear in mind that achieving the 1%, to avoid the 1%, the 5 degrees centigrade, this goal as a target that all countries should aim to mitigate climate change, to avoid that the global temperature will rise to that 1.5%.
Yes, Mr. Liu, the report also warned that if we do not conduct the deep emissions reductions across all sectors immediately, limiting global heating, as you said, to 1.5 degrees, and will not be possible at the goal. So how urgent it is for us, to reinforce the climate action to meet such a goal, and in particular, China and the United States, the two largest carbon emission countries, how can they cooperate more efficiently, more effectively in that regard?
Of course, I think over the crisis, because in view of the slowdown of the economy, in view of the change of the lifestyle of the people, there really kind of reduction of the emissions over the past 2 years. It is real, but this is not the people all countries should not be really fully satisfied with this. But we can also see it with the recovery, as emissions continue to grow. So the urgent action remains needed for all countries to take the measures for energy transition. I think of course, this is a very difficult challenge for many countries, even now for the European countries, when they confronted this energy crisis caused by the Ukrainian crisis, and due to their policy to separate the energy supply from Russia. So that people in many countries start to take energy security as their first priority. But for the governments and for people of the world, we're still advising them that they should be determined for energy transition. So that's why I think we are encouraging the major economies, including US, China, continue their collaboration to lead the world for the global energy transition. So it's luckily, I think, since President Biden came to office a year ago, I think the China-US cooperation on climate change has been resumed. So their China-US joint Glasgow Declaration really sent a strong signal to the world. They are the two largest economies. They are prepared to cooperate. That's a good signal, because I think the world is still waiting for the two countries, because US-China emissions account for 45% of global emissions. So that's very serious. So, but of course, people are talking about what are the historical responsibility of the developed countries. But I think in reality that we need to take care of both. Of course, most important countries like US, China, they could continue to collaborate to lead the global transition for renewable energy.
China recently rolled out supportive policies to help small and medium-sized enterprises, including tax cuts and subsidies, because SMEs, they produce the largest number of jobs for the country. So how can we further stimulate vitality for these companies during the pandemic, or at least help them weather through this crisis? Is there anything China can learn from other countries?
Definitely, I think of course, since the pandemic and the global crisis, the micro, small and medium-sized enterprises have been hit hardest. So many of these enterprises have been closed down. That's why we highly appreciate the measurement, and we highly appreciate the policy and the measures taken by the Chinese government since 2 years ago to support these small and medium-sized enterprises. I think this is good practice. Of course, there are also good practices in other countries. So we encourage Chinese government to continue such a policy to support small and medium-sized enterprises to not just for their survival and economic development, but also help them continue to retain the employment. As well, I think we're also encouraging China to learn from other countries. I think some, in the pandemic, there's many other new good practices experience also emerging. So this is a process I think we really need to learn from each other to continue to improve the policies and the measures. There's a new ideas, concept also emerging, like I think how we are going to address the informal economy, including care economy, including gray economy. So many new ideas, new forms of economy also emerging. And that's why I think that for China also need to learn from other countries, including how China government going to make best use of the resources from the aging society, because China already become an aging society, but these aged people, they also have their resources. At the same time, how to really create really adequate support force, including support industry for care of aging society. This is going to be, so the Chinese government also need to learn from other governments. So that's why I think to be when many governments, including Chinese government, confront the issue of how to ensure the employment rate. At the same time, most important to create more employment opportunities for different categories of people, not only just for the graduates, but for other people. I think that because in the long run, of course, the extension of the retirement age also be needed in many countries. That have already been done in the developed countries. In China, I think that because they also have to adjust some of the policies. So looking forward to the forthcoming decade, I think the world in a very critical juncture to recover from the global crisis, But at the same time, it's also opportunity to reformulate their policy in all respects, including energy, including manufacturing, including the employment, including creating more new forms of employment. That's why I think people suffered, the world suffered from this pandemic, but we also learned some. Most important, I think, for the Chinese government, for other governments, it to be learning from the crisis to improve the policy and management.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. Thank you for your time and insights. On that note, we conclude today's show. Many thanks to our guest. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.